saw a tweet earlier this week from VA Redemption. You may know them from our trailer for Whitechapel Dark Mist, and they are in the opening for Whitechapel Dark Mist as our voiceover artiste.
You can also find Redemption playing a lot of games. Got his own Twitch channel now, doing some of his own stuff, but you can also find him on DMDM Studios playing with them a lot. Got a Ko-Fi coffee, he does voiceover, maps, bunch of stuff. Great guy.
But he tweeted out, do you think that D&D has become synonymous with tabletop games in the way that people say Kleenex when they mean tissues? And there's a couple other ones like Oreo when you mean sandwich cookies.
Band-Aids when you mean a bandage.
Yeah.
Velcro and some off-brand hook and whatever.
Hook and eye.
Yeah.
Fastener.
So what do y'all think about that?
Do I think it has become that? Yes. Do I think that it is good? No. It's not good. And I find myself sometimes even here, like we say D&D and then I have to no, TTRPGs, because I'm really referring to the whole spectrum. But it is hard because that is the one that if you're talking to people outside of the community that they're going to understand what you're talking about. So it's like, what do you do with your weekends? Oh, I play Call of Cthulhu. I play D&D. Oh, okay. I gotcha. You know?
It's sort of like, and I actually replied this to the tweet, back in the day, your parents would be like, are you playing on the Nintendo, son? And you're playing Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega Genesis. And you'd be like, yeah.
Because it's easier.
You didn't have a Nintendo console in the house. Everything was Nintendo.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's mostly true for people who aren't playing TTRPGs, right? You don't have to play TTRPGs long before you recognize that there are several different types, and you probably don't just refer to everything as D&D. But people who haven't played it, it's like there's this big massive stuff over there, and in it is D&D and Call of Cthulhu and Savage Worlds and Blades in the Dark and a bunch of other stuff, and they just go, it's D&D. And I'm okay with that because, hell, they'll talk about it now.
True.
They'll talk about it, but it will take a long time for them to get from D&D to, oh, there's this other thing too. And I think with Stranger Things coming out, there's a lot of people who are getting into D&D because of Stranger Things. And there are two systems, Call of Cthulhu and Kids on Bikes, that are explicitly better for doing something like you'd see in Stranger Things than D&D. So there are going to be people who they go play D&D because of Stranger Things and they're like, I liked Stranger Things, but I don't like this, and never come back to tabletop RPGs.
That's a good point.
And there are a lot of creators out there right now that they're making really cool things, and they're not able to pay rent with what they're making because D&D has such a enormous share of everything out there.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I remember when we first started streaming and you were trying to figure out what to tag our streams as. There was you'd have this moment of battling with yourself as to whether or not to
tabletop RPGs or Dungeons and Dragons, because the Chaosium streams of Call of Cthulhu usually are under Dungeons and Dragons. They just put Call of Cthulhu in the title.
Because that's what people are out there searching for, is Dungeons and Dragons. And if you want people viewing, you want people to know what you're talking about to some degree, you got to put something that's recognizable. But I wish we could get to a point where we don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
And I think it will eventually get there. And the trajectory is on, because like the Nintendo situation, when all that was coming out, yeah, everything was a Nintendo. But now, most parents do understand that there is Nintendos and Xboxes and PlayStations and whatever.
We grew up with them, but you go ask Grandma Marilyn, and she would probably remember from your and Sarah's childhood having the Nintendo, and then from Hannah's childhood, the PlayStation, and then from Tim's childhood, the Xbox, and it kind of has drifted, but it's still a little.
But as they've gotten more mainstream, you'll see more and more groups of people, and she may be an outlier because she is 80.
Hi, matey.
That fuck.
She's reached the pirate age.
We should have
I'm matey.
But you see more and more groups that understand that there's not just Nintendos. I think once TTRPGs kind of reaches that trajectory the same way video games has, we will see more people not just calling everything D&D. The only way to get there, though, is to put content out, put whatever, talk about things, and not just call it D&D. It's not inherently damaging. It's just not
Optimal.
Yeah, it could be a lot worse.
It could be.
So I know when we were going to Chaosium Con, right? And so I take 4 or 5 days off of work and boss at work. I said, where did you go again? I said, we went to Michigan, near Ann Arbor. Oh, yeah, what?
Why would you go there?
Why would you go to Ann Arbor? Well, I was up there for a gaming convention. Gaming convention? Like, tabletop role-playing games? Still, blank look on his face. Yeah, it's called Chaosium Con for a game called Call of Cthulhu. You know, dice and role-playing. Oh, like D&D. Yep.
That's the one.
That's the one. It's a gateway.
It's a gateway drug.
It is.
Until the market shifts, and I don't know how it will with such a behemoth as 5e or D&D at all, then D&D is going to be the gateway to a bunch of other RPGs. There are people out there. I know there are. You see them on Twitter who never played D&D. Somebody they know and trust got them into Pathfinder or Call of Cthulhu or something else. But I think the most users that have been pushed towards those other smaller TTRPGs have come from D&D. It's the entry point.
And there's nothing inherently wrong with that.
If I was the creator of Call of Cthulhu, it'd piss me off if people said, oh, it's D&D.
It's not.
It is not. Let me tell you why. But you know what? Posh Puffs, you know what shelf they have in the grocery store? The one right next to Kleenex.
It's true.
Right? They align themselves next to Kleenex, and those off-brand Velcro things are hanging on a hook right next to Velcro brand, right? Got to get up close to those other things to get seen and sold.
That's a good metaphor.
That is a good metaphor.
Thanks. Just came up with it all on the spot.
And
right
as
there.
we see things like the age group, like my age group, your age group, continue to
I love the way you consider those different age groups. Because from my vantage point, it's that age group.
That's fair. But there is an age difference here. But as we become like, and this is going to sound really insensitive to you, and I'm very sorry.
I'm about to be insulted.
You are.
Watch my face for the reaction.
I think we were born in the same presidential term.
We're 6 years apart.
84 and 90.
See, Reagan was 80 to 88, and then Bush was...
Okay.
Anywho.
And I know that because I'm old enough.
But you know how we see like a shift in the way like, you know, markets go and technology goes, because as the younger groups get older and they become the market share of things, their preferences and what they know becomes what needs to be part of the market. So as your demographic and older that didn't know what Nintendo was, you know, the parents who were like, oh, well, get your Nintendo when you're not a Sega. As they got older and became less of the market share, and our generations became, and we know the difference, then the definition of those became more prominent because we are the market now.
It's funny, though, because you as the market are now going to retro game stores trying to find an old game console for those old ones, right? And it reminds me of this commercial. It was more of a PSA back in the 80s where father walks into his son's room and he grabs a cigar box off his son's dresser and he opens it up and there's marijuana in there and he's like, where did you get this? Where did you learn about this? And the kid goes, I learned it from watching you. all these kids that are interested in it, a lot of what they know about it, they are learning from
D&D.
the people that were above them. Yeah.
And exactly. But as that knowledge shifts down and becomes more and more part of the market share, I think D&D and TTRPGs in general will become more definitive because like our kids understand the difference between Call of Cthulhu and D&D. So when they're like, as the parents who are now learning these things and more people join, even if it is through the guise of all of it's D&D, as they learn the definitions and they start branching that out, the market share becomes more reflective of that knowledge. And so you'll see, I'm sure in, I don't know how long, but at some point, there will be a definitive definition between those different TTRPGs because that's what the market will demand of.
And going online has pushed some of that already. I think you've seen the, at the start of the pandemic, Roll20 was like 90% D&D and 10% a bunch of other stuff. And now at I want to say the end of the pandemic, but damn it, if we didn't just have to go back to wearing masks at work again today. So I can't really say the end of the pandemic. But after 2.5 years, it's like 20% of what's played on Roll20 is Call of Cthulhu. It's now the second biggest one. It's only at 20%, but that's a huge jump over the last couple of years.
Double.
And the pandemic has pushed online role-playing games a lot.
On top of that, the 100% making up those numbers has gotten a lot bigger because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But I think we'll see a definition that'll continue to grow in between those three things. I think right now it's like you said, it's a gateway. But as people who go through that gate begin to learn the definition, they're going to spread that information further and further along. Because, I mean, even this time last year, I had no idea what Savage Worlds was, Kids on Bikes, any of that. I had no idea that they even existed. And now, here I am.
By the way, I finished reading the Kids on Bikes book.
Did you?
It's pretty short, actually.
Oh,
pretty tight
I look forward
set
to
of
playing
rules. And it'd be kind of fun. I don't know when we'll fit it in, but
we'll make it.
Right after Starfinder.
Yeah. And Pendragon. And
Rune Quest.
Yeah, all that good stuff.
Yeah, we literally have an autographed we have 2 autographed copies of 7 Seas in this house right now.
I know. I want to play that one so bad.